I think for loud managers or loud bosses, what I do is that I evaluate the situation. I think with that, because bosses don't like surprises and bosses don't like losing control of everything. And for loud subordinates, it's challenging. I've personally encountered those too, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, I think it's all about attribution. Humble people tend to do internal attribution, and some loud people tend to do external attribution. But I think there's a line that needs to be drawn for, especially for humble people, because we tend to do internal attributing so much that we blame ourselves on everything. But it's very helpful to really differentiate the things that you can control and the things that you can't. So for example, when I'm applying for a job, if I prepared my resume and I send it to the wrong email, that's my fault, right? Because that's something I can control, but I didn't do it well. So that's my fault. But if I prepared my resume, I sent it to the right person before the deadline, and then I went to the interview, but I wasn't invited to the second round, does that mean it's my fault? No, because I did everything I could, and that's their decision. It's not something I can control. So I think having that line is really helpful mentally, especially for humble people. And before everyone blaming on you, I think we should have the ability to tell which one is really something I can control and which ones are the things that I can't. I think for loud managers or loud bosses, what I do is that I evaluate the situation. If there's a difficulty for me to do this, I will escalate the difficulties to my managers and to my bosses. And I will use very specific data to express why I cannot do that, or there are limitations that I cannot achieve this. So I need this and that for support. Otherwise, things may go this and that. I think with that, because bosses don't like surprises and bosses don't like losing control of everything. So if you report that in a very logical way and really realistic way of showing the resources you need and the resources that you lack and the potential consequences, I think even for loud managers or loud bosses, they will be willing to sit down and discuss that with you. And that helps you to create a more equal conversation. And for loud subordinates, it's challenging. I've personally encountered those too. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if they're loud, that means at least A, they have confidence, and B, that maybe their capability is very good and they believe in themselves. So they are making different suggestions and they want different directions from your instructions. And that's not always a bad thing. What I do is that I would listen to them. I will listen to their suggestions or directions they want. And then I will talk with them about how to combine their goals with the team's goal, so that when the two goals are combined or aligned, that means whatever the person works on will be helpful for the team's goal. So again, I think having very loud subordinates, sometimes you just give them a guideline, a very general guideline, and set the boundaries of, like, these are the things that you cannot do. Otherwise, the playground is yours. You can play whatever you like. Yeah, just let them be them and let them show, let them play. Okay, so I have two roles. First role is an author, but also I have a like a real job, that is the international philanthropy advisor. So sometimes these roles overlap. And sometimes when I talk to people in my job, they will say, "Oh, you're Jill. Oh my gosh, I read your book and I really like your work." And I would be so embarrassed. I cannot take the credit, and I would always say that, "Oh, thank you, like I don't deserve it." But later I found out that they actually like me doing that because although I'm a best-selling author, I'm not arrogant, and that actually helps me in my other job and in facilitating more cooperations and facilitating better partnerships. If I am a very loud person, I go out and show off and say, "Hey, I'm a best-selling author, and why don't you come work with me? Or why don't we establish or sign this contract?" They'll be like, "Huh, who are you? Why are you in the position of saying that?" So yeah, that works in Asian culture, and also in the U.S. too. I noticed that people don't always like loud people, especially when you're doing business development or when you are establishing an important relationship. They observe and they see what kind of person you are, and then they make their decisions of whether or not to work with you. So yeah, I feel like being humble is my setting, but at the same time, I feel like it's a good setting. I like it. I feel like I recently read a book that says the 2 traits that will help you to earn trust in a very short time. One is professionalism, like being professional, and the second is being warm. So I think for humble people, we can have both. For being professional, because we always don't think we're not good enough, so we'll continue learning. So that will help us to be a very professional person in our own positions. And the second is that because we don't put ourselves in the center, we care about the others, we listen, so naturally we're warm people. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more like everyone has a different personality. I probably wouldn't force her to be humble or be loud. I would probably just let her grow the way she is. But what I can do and what I would really want to do is do this. And what I'm doing is now to do this empathy training. Because I think although we have different personalities and every people we encounter may have different personalities, having empathy is really something that we need to learn since our childhood. So I would do this exercise with her, for example, if she's having an argument with someone, I would ask all the details, and then I will ask her, okay, if you were the other person, what would you think? And what were you thinking when you're saying that? And why do you think you would say that? You know, things like that I think would be helpful for her to understand that people come from different places and they have different ideas, and it's their freedom to share their own ideas, but respect would be the umbrella that covers all the relationships. I hope that people who lack of confidence can pick up this book, and people who sometimes experience self-doubts can pick up this book, and also people who think they're not good enough or they have questions on themselves. I hope they can pick up this book, and I hope that through sharing my personal stories and lessons learned, they could have more tools, including strategies and specific mindsets and action steps to take into the workplace. So for overworking and burning out, I encourage humble people really to evaluate what they're working on and why they're working on, and like how many hours they're working on everything, and then decide whether there's room for improvement. And of course, there will be situations like, okay, I'm spending so much time on this, but I know this is useless. I know this is not helping. And then here comes to the point that you need to evaluate whether you need to stay in this environment. If this is not something you can change, you still have the decision to make. You can choose to stay in this environment and work up through it, or you can leave the environment. You choose to change environment and for a different set of working style or mindsets. I think one advice for all the humble people is really to take control. We are humble doesn't mean that we are offering the control of our lives to the other people. Still, we are the masters of ourselves, and still we are the only ones that get to decide our own lives. So whatever we do, make sure that we put ourselves first. And after that, taking care of our personal lives, taking care of our health, taking care of our family, or anything that you think is priority. And then you can develop a strategy of achieving your goals and achieving your priorities.